Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Hearsay, a series that aims to touch on social issues in Singapore and around the world.
And with this series, we aim to bring awareness and also shed some spotlight on certain topics. We aim to get public opinions on these topics that actually matter.
My name is Carisha.
And my name is Jack.
And we're
We
your
are the
hosts
hosts
of
of
Hearsay. Singapore is one of the few states that still retains the death penalty. The law was mandated during the colonial British rule that was consciously retained by the newly elected government following the independence in 1965. Capital punishment was extended to drug-related offenses in 1973 under the Misuse of Drugs Act law. There are 32 offenses that could potentially warrant death sentences right here in Singapore. 4 of these call for the mandatory death penalty. These 4 include murder, drug trafficking, terrorism, possession of unauthorized firearms, ammunitions, and explosives. Rape was punishable by death until 2007, until it was abolished, along with immunity. While hanging is the method used in Singapore, different countries go about it in different ways. For example, lethal injection is used in China, Vietnam, and the USA. Electrocution is also used in the USA. Hanging is done by several countries such as Afghanistan, Bangladesh, India, and more. Shooting is done in countries such as China, Indonesia, and North Korea, and more. And last but not least, beheading is done in Saudi Arabia.
According to the Ministry of Home Affairs website, Singapore actually puts in place the death penalty for a very limited number of cases and offences. So these offences are serious enough to cause harm to the victims and to society. Singapore has put in place many judicial safeguards surrounding its use. In Singapore, the death penalty is conducted through hanging under Section 316 of the Criminal Procedure Code. So the recent case surrounding Nagen Thran has sparked a major controversy and conversation around the morality of the death penalty in Singapore. So now we'll be hitting the streets to find out more on the public's opinion on this controversy. Let's go.
All right, so first question. What is your stance on capital punishment in Singapore? Are you for or against the death penalty?
Personally, I'm against the death penalty. I'm personally against the death penalty. I don't think Singapore or any government should have the right to take away the life of anyone.
Still leaning towards for as a good deterrent because
Right.
I still believe that if without this deterrent, we might lose our social morals. We might lose our social compass as well. Yes.
I just think it's like a cruel form of punishment. I don't think it's appropriate, especially like considering you're punishing someone. You're giving a punishment that is the exact crime that they've committed.
Yeah. What would you rather have, life imprisonment or the death penalty?
I'm a hypocrite. I would rather have the death penalty.
Life imprisonment.
Yeah.
Given the two options, I would prefer life imprisonment.
All right.
Yeah, if I got life in prison, I'd hang myself.
Yeah, I do. I'd rather take the death penalty, but to each his own.
Okay, but just to keep you a little bit more informed, the way that life imprisonment works in Singapore is that it's usually 15 to 20 years and then you're out on parole.
Yeah.
So what then?
I still want the,
Yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you.
I'll choose death penalty. Actually, wait, let me think about it. Okay, potentially life imprisonment. So if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on this, but life imprisonment is not actually your entire natural life.
Right.
It's only 20 years.
Yes, correct.
Right? So because of that, then technically just 20 years, then I... Ciao.
Probation.
Yeah.
All right.
Generally, but like, I think it really depends also. Like, for example, if I did something that I feel is unforgivable, then I would want to kill myself, but I wouldn't kill myself, I have the state to kill me.
Okay, so we have completed our street interview and now we're back in our studio and we have a special guest with us today.
We're joined by none other than Elijah, who is a social activist against the death penalty. So my first question to you is really, how did you get into this?
Right, so I actually started off in activism, like in the activist civil society scene when I was 16. And I think along the way, because I get more involved in spaces where people believe that human rights are important, right? And gradually having conversations, attending panel discussions, I get more perspectives of how inequality affects people beyond the queer community, right? Like that racism and xenophobia and classism are very prevalent across the world and even in Singapore. Yeah, I watch TED Talks and videos of YouTube. And one of the TED Talks was given by this activist called Kristen Hunt. It brought me to think about like the death penalty in Singapore. I also watched some videos that talked about it in the context of like Malaysia and things like that. Yeah, so that was what really brought like the issue of the death penalty into my consciousness. But even then, like I didn't think too much about it. It was only end last year when Nagin Turan's case blew up.
Wow, so you've been following it from the start.
Yeah, from the start. I mean start-ish, like when it was brought into like more public awareness, when the petition was going around, then that's when it's like, okay, this is something that needs to be confronted, right? It's an issue. For me personally, whether he was disabled or not, I think no one has the right to take the life away from someone else. Yeah, so I think his case, alongside the knowledge that like right now there are like about 62 people on death row, and seeing how urgently the state is just handing out like you know like execution notices like macam like it's something that we need to pay attention to, like, especially since like the state is acting on it right now. And I think that's what brought me to wanna advocate for this cause, you know, like lives are at stake.
So the death penalty actually started from British colonial rule last time. So as we develop and grow, why do you think like Singapore government will keep these penalties in place? Like what are your opinions about it?
Right. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of the government. I don't know why they choose to retain certain laws. But at the moment, like, their argument is that like it's a deterrent, right? Like, if we have the death penalty, then people will stop committing the drugs that would lead them to get the death penalty. But like the reality of the situation is that like it doesn't work that way because of how the system of global capitalism has disproportionately affected and exploited people of marginalized identities. So if you're poor, if you're of racial minority, then chances are you're gonna be pushed into a state of poverty to the extent where like you're choosing between, okay, do I want to peddle drugs or do I want to, you know, or leave my family and myself to like struggle and die, you know? Yeah, so I personally am not convinced by the government's position, right? That like the death penalty is a deterrent. Like maybe if you say that it's a deterrent for people who are privileged, who are middle class from like committing these acts, then sure. But like people who are middle upper class don't even have to be put in a position where they have to think about like doing crime to get out of poverty or like simply to survive in the first place.
It's like everybody's individual stories are very different and all these factors have to be taken into consideration. Right, yeah, I totally agree with that as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the recent cases are more of drug dealings and stuff. But do you think like there are other crimes that could be punishable by the death penalty? For example, maybe murder? Yeah.
I mean, my personal position is that like no one deserves to take the life away from another person. So I think the death penalty should be abolished. Because just because you committed a crime, you know, it could be murder, it could be kidnapping. These are serious crimes, and people need to be rehabilitated. People need to like learn that these are wrong things that they shouldn't do again. So I think it's not a matter of like how do we punish them more harshly or like who should we punish, but like what are the social structures that are currently in place that drive people to commit these crimes in the first place, and how can we create a society where like people are recognize the worth of each human being, right? And not turn to violence, not turn to murder, things like that.
So it's seeing the root of the problem itself.
Yeah, exactly.
I see.
Yeah, I think majority of Singaporeans are still, after a survey was done, are still more in support of the death penalty. And I guess their reasoning is that, you know, when someone does something as like preposterous as like murder or kidnapping or arson or whatever it is, that they don't want these people back into society for their own safety.
Yes.
And we went to the street and we asked people's opinions on the death penalty, of course. And our last question was quite an interesting one because we asked people personally if it was them, would they rather take the death penalty for themselves or go through life imprisonment? So even though some people were against the death penalty, when they talked about themselves personally, they were like, I'd rather die than spend my life in prison.
Yeah.
What are your opinions on that?
Like how would I respond to that question?
Yeah.
I feel like in the first place you shouldn't be given that ultimatum, but like
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah, but I think if it was for myself, right, if I had to go through the death penalty or life imprisonment, I think I would go through with the life imprisonment. But also like there are different factors that I have to consider, right? Like in Singapore, I'm a non-binary person, so but my legal sex is still indicated as F. So like, would I be comfortable being recognized as a woman for the rest of my life, right? Like if I were to be sent for life imprisonment, but I don't think at this point in time, I would say I'm still mentally healthy, so I wouldn't choose death. And I believe that there is value in my life, that I can still like, even behind the cells, perhaps like if I'm like, it depends on whether I'm also like life imprisonment like on or without parole.
Right.
So like if there's a chance that I could get out and like continue to do good for society, I would want to like hold on to that hope. But even if I'm stuck in a cell for the rest of my life, there are still people around me, right? Like there are people I can interact with, there are people who can still go back to society.
It's still a life. You still have those interactions.
Right, correct. So I think like if in any small way possible, I still have the capacity to influence people to do good, or like to bring good into people's lives, then I would use my life for that, even though I'm being held captive for whatever reason.
I see. So perhaps what are some of the resources that are actually available for individuals of the public that actually want to learn more about the death penalty in some of the cases?
Right. So there's this organization called Transformative Justice Collective, TJC. They actually recently released a report called We Don't See the Sky. So they talked about the issues surrounding incarceration, like what people, like outside prison, we don't see what goes on inside. So I think it's a pretty insightful report to look at. If you want like a general like view of like, issues that concern Singapore, but like are not really talked about in our society, right, and a bit of like our history as well, I think left.sg is a great account to follow as well. I've learned a lot from the things that they've shared. So I think those are like general resources that you can turn to. If you could also sign petitions, and also get our local news sites to talk about this, because I think like the tendency of like issues that surround the death penalty in Singapore is that like when the case happens, they report that like, okay, this person has been sentenced to death, and then they just disappear from public consciousness. There's no follow-up if like they were hanged, or like if like there are activists fighting, at the very best we get like maybe non-conventional news sites like reporting on these things and people circulating news on social media, but like very little times you'll see Straits Times say like, hey, someone is being hanged and like they have an IQ of like 69, so there needs to be more reporting of this in conventional news sites for this to be brought into public attention. And even if there isn't like an explicit position like put out by journalists, people still need to like recognize that this is something that people are talking about and have access to resources where people can have a more like balanced point of view rather than just be fed with like what is being taught to us in schools, which very much leans towards the government's position.
Yeah, so it's also about demographic, like what platforms, are addressing these things. And with social media, it's usually our generation mostly. So like you said, if it's on the news sites, it'll reach a more wider demographic that I think, is probably the target audience for this matter as well. Yeah. So I think we are very well informed, and there are so many resources and so many more information outlets that you can learn more about the death penalty in Singapore and what can be done to maybe change the current climate that we have here in Singapore. So thank you very much for speaking with us, and we learned so much from you today. So thank you.
So I guess that's the end of the first episode of Hearsay.
We hope that you could learn something about the drug penalty laws that we have here in Singapore, and maybe this episode maybe helped you, inspire you in some sort of way.
And do like, share, subscribe this video, and do let us know in the comments below what are some of your opinions on this particular topic.
We would love to know what you think. And until next time, thank you and goodbye.
Bye-bye.